Good evening, everyone.
Couple Tav, how are you?
Baruch Hashem, thank you. Okay. Okay, so I think we're starting a new chapter. So it says here in the tour, "Ve'achar kach mevi'in lo kos shel yain," right? Now we're talking about the next phase, right? Which is the cup of wine, right? The cup of blessing. So they bring this cup to him to bless on it, birkat hamazon, right? So what he does is he blesses on that cup, birkat hamazon. So what does that mean on that cup? It means that he holds it while he does birkat hamazon. Right? Aber lo shar mashkin, but he says not other drinks, right? Only wine works for this. Afilu im kava layu, even if he right made that his meal, whatever that drinking that drink, whatever it was. So that's the language of the tour. Says a bit Yosef, Bepek Arab Sachim, right? This is the place, the source for this. It says there in Kuf Zayin Amud Bet, Aleph, Tam Rabbanan en mekadeshin ela ala yain. So it says over there, right, that we should only make kiddush on wine. Ven mibrachin ela ala yain. Also, when we do bracha, what does that mean? Birkat hamazon. Also, that's done on wine as well. Ve'asikna de'achi kamar. So conclusion is there that it means to say like this: En omrim haba kos ala have kos ala shel bracha. So we don't say right, bring a cup of blessing. Levarech ela al yain. We only say that about wine. So Pirish Rashbam explains, "En mivrachin bracham birkat hamazon." We're talking about birkat hamazon. Hanamile de lo kabale. That's talking about where he didn't right fix his meal on that, whatever. About kabale, but if he made his meal on that, so there letlan ba we don't care about it. According to this opinion, it's okay. You can use some other type of drink. Right? Lo gasinan. So he says. We don't have this text like that. Uh, so it says there also the Mordechai, the Logasinan, it says also we don't have this text there. So which text are we talking about? It says there, right, that about Kaba Litlanba, that if he made his meal on that, we don't care about it. In other words, we allow that. So he says, right, that text is probably it's erroneous. That's what he's saying, right? Basically. Okay, so it's interesting. כיוון כיוון שאינו חמר מדינה, because, okay, so, וכן כתב מרדכי, that's also מרדכי, שם מרדכי, דלא גרסינן הכי משום, בכל עניין אין מברכין עליו. So he says, we don't have this text, again, right, same thing. Why? Because we don't bless on that, any other drink besides wine. כיוון שאינו חמר מדינה. Why? Because it's not considered to be like a, Chamar Medina means like it's like the drink of the country. Right? What does that mean? It's like the right the alcoholic drink of beverage of choice. Like whatever, right? So that's usually wine, which is considered to be like the best drink, alcoholic drink. Like all the other stuff, it's good, but wine is right more prominent than all of them. Okay, whatever. So, והגות מימוניות, right, it says in הגות מימון, פרק ז', כתב הלכות גדולות, he says that הלכות גדולות, and also the Rach, right, Tosot, Grosinoto, they do have this text. Okay. וכן דת רביה, that's what it says also רביה. וכתב עוד, so he writes there further, דאין נקרא קביעות אלא היכן שרגילים תמיד בכך. So he says that's only when we say, right, that you're making the meal, fixing the meal, that's only if you're like always accustomed to do like that. כגון במקום שאין יין מצוי. For instance, let's say, right, when wine is not, right, available. So you know what it is, right? Like there are places, that when there's no wine, right, they do the next best thing, right? So what they have beer, right? Whatever it is, right? Something like that. So that becomes the next choice after wine. וכן דעת הראש, and so that's also being in the Rosh Merachin ala Shechar, that we can't bless on the right other alcoholic drinks, right, like beer, as we said, right, or some other things, whiskey, whatever it is. Im and yain matsui, if there's no wine there, right? Shkatav alota briyata miu hechad dehava chamar medina niyadim varchin. So he says, but when it's like an alcoholic beverage which is used in the country, widespread, we can bless on that as well. Alav. Right? So he says everybody agrees that when it comes to Havdalah, right, it does require a cup. Right? All the more so he says you can do Birkat Hamazon. Right? So what he means to say is like this, right? That when you don't have wine, you can make Havdalah on beer, or some other beverage, right? Alcoholic beverage. So all the more so when it comes to Birkat Hamazon, right, which is even lighter. It's not as stringent as Havdalah, because Havdalah is something like major. Okay, whatever. It's more like a major thing. It's more obligation also. So therefore, right, if it's allowed for Havdalah, all the more so he's saying it's allowed for Birkat Hamazon. So he says there is one that says in this perek, the ena teuna kos, that doesn't require a cup. Right? What does that mean? Birkat Hamazon, right? Doesn't require a cup of wine. And many of us don't do, right? We don't bless Birkat Hamazon on wine. Most people don't do it today. But some people do, and it's a good thing. It's a very good thing. Okay, whatever. So anyway, right? That's what also Rabbeinu says, right? The tour close by. So he says the same thing, right? That if there is no wine in that area, whatever, they can't find any wine. So yachol levarech ala shechar. So you can use, right, some other alcoholic beverage, right, beer, whatever it is. B'shar mashkin, right, also other types of drinks. meaning to say, right, other alcoholic drinks. Umash katav de en mevarchin ala sha'ar mashkin. And that what you said, right, that we don't bless on other drinks. Afilu ikava alehu, even if they fix the meal on that. Hainu b'makom shematzu yain. That's a place where there is wine available. Ela sha'alu she'elu kavu ala shechar, right? But these people, what they did was, anyway, they went, right, to do beer instead of wine, even though there was wine. So that's not a good thing, right? We don't want that. So the truth is, you should know that this machloket that we see over here regarding wine and beer and other right, alcoholic beverages, it's same thing applies to kiddush, and havdalah. So the rule is, we're going to see later on in Shulchan Aruch, right, that always, when it comes to these mitzvot, wine is the preferred, way to do it, method, and as we said, right, what's the reason why? Because it's more prominent than all the other drinks. So therefore, the sages prefer to have wine on these things, So when do we allow other beverages? Only if there's no wine. I remember one time, my friend invited me over when I was coming from Israel, over here in this area. And, so I went to him for Shabbat. And, then when Shabbat ended, so he wants to make Havdalah, whatever. So he looks in his fridge, he has no wine. Whatever. So I said, "Oh, there you go. You got a bottle of beer there." I told him, "Use that, right?" So he made it on beer. Right? He had a Heineken in the fridge. So that's what he used, right? But if you have wine, you really shouldn't use beer, right? It's not proper to do that, right? Even though we find, right, that the Ashkenazim are more lenient about this. They like to do, kiddush on schnapps, right? All kinds of stuff like that, especially in the morning, Shabbat morning, they like to do that, right? In the synagogue, they like to use schnapps, whiskey and right, all kinds of stuff like that, vodka and God knows what else, right? Whatever, right? All that stuff, that hard stuff, the hard liquor, right? So, they like to use that. But the truth is, that custom is not really according to Shulchan Aruch, right? Shulchan Aruch says that, if there's wine available, you shouldn't make kiddush or any of these things, right, that we mentioned here. Any of these mitzvot, you shouldn't do it on other types of beverages. Okay, God bless, whatever, right? It's all good. Um, the Birkat Hamazon te'una kos afilu biyachid, right? So he says that, so the Torah says that Birkat Hamazon, right, needs a cup of wine, in other words, even if you're doing it, as a single person, right? So it says regarding this, the Bet Yosef, Aresha the Miltakai, the Kamar Mevin lo kos shel yain, the mashmat biyabchid mayre. Right. So he said, right, that Bet Yosef, that he's talking about that issue that this whole halacha was mentioned for an individual. So therefore, that implies that even an individual, right, should use wine to do Birkat Hamazon. Right. But and I did see, I when I gave the class tonight, little mini class in the shul tonight, right, the mini lecture. So I brought there, the Zohar. The Zohar says not like that, right? The Zohar says you should only do wine when there's three people there, three men, right? Whatever. Otherwise, it's not necessary, and it's not customary either. So we'll see what the halacha is, right? If it's one person or whatever it is. But the Zohar says three people. Okay, whatever. So anyway, uh, so it says Bet Yosef here further on, "V'hu de birkat hamazon teuna kos beperek arbe psachim." So he says, where does it say that birkat hamazon should have a cup of wine? Right, that's in Arbe Psachim Kuf He Amud Bet. Tanya anichnas lebeto b'motzi Shabbat. It says over there in the Braita, the person who goes into his house right after Shabbat ends, v'asikna shema mina me'ay matnita. So they conclude over there. They don't bring those whole Gemara there here, but they don't bring it here. But the conclusion there was, you learn from this, right, that what? Birkat Hamazon teunakos. Birkat Hamazon does require a cup. Katwa Tosfot, umashma defilu biachid teunakos. So Tosfot says, right, from this Gemara, it implies that even one person requires that. Right? Nichnas mashma dehu yichidi. Because the language is like singular, so that implies that it's even an individual. Interesting. The mashma lekaman, like that, and that's what he implies later on. Miu yesh didchot, but he says, you know what? There's also another way to look at it, right? So look what he says, right? In the end, the Tosfot, he says, "Ve'olam en nohagim birkat hamazon al kos ela b'shlosha." So he says, but the custom is, we don't do the cup unless we have three people, right? So there you go, right? The Zohar won out in the end. That was the conclusion over here, right? Like the Zohar, we need three people. Okay, right. Well, that's the custom, he says, right? And that's also our custom. We usually don't do it if there's not three people, right? So we usually do it like at gatherings, where there's gathering of people. That's when we bless on the cup. The Rashbam Omer Latin kos afilu biachid, but Rashbam says not like that, right? That he requires even for one person. V'chen muchach b'midrash shochar tov. It says that's the way it implies in the midrash, right? Okay, it's interesting, right? So as we said, right, the Zohar says not like that, right? So let's see, right, what happens over here in the end. A lot of opinions we got here. V'od muchach me'Rabbi Yechiel de teuna kos. Right. Also, this rabbi seems to say that it needs a cup afilu biachid when an individual. De'ena teuna kos. Lama menichol leachar hamazon, right? So it's because it doesn't require a cup. Why does he leave it for after the meal? When he read dechen halachat de birkat hamazon teuna kos ad kan. So he says, therefore he says the halacha is the birkat hamazon does require a cup. The Rosh Katav called Divrei Tosfot. So the Rosh brings down Tosfot, right? That Rabbeinu Tofes Ikar Kedivrei Omrim Teuna Kos Afilu B'Yachid. So the Torah seems to paskin even for one person it requires a cup, right? Lefichach Katav shetzarich lachazer. Therefore, he wrote that Harab, you have to look for cup kederech shemachzirin al mitzvot. Just like we look for other mitzvot to do, right? We go around looking for stuff to do the mitzvah. V'chen dat Rabbeinu Yerucham. Also, Rabbeinu Yerucham says like that. V'chen dat Rabbeinu Yonah. Right. So we see a lot of Rishonim say like that. Right. בסוף פרק 3 שאכלו, גם מודים החכמים לרבי אליעזר, בכושר ברכה, ברכת המזון, טעונה כוס, אפילו ביחיד. Right. So he also says, right, even an individual. אלא שממש כתב שם, but he says from that which he wrote there that we don't bless on a cup right, of punishment. That implies that you don't have to really look for the wine. So he says, right, also a tour that he really shouldn't eat unless he's going to have a cup to bless with, Can you imagine? And he goes that far. Right, so it says, so it says, it seems like he learns this from Havdalah. We're going to explain later on, right? Laws of Shabbat. So anyway, right, what is he trying to say over here? That he's very stringent, that he's telling you if you don't have a cup to bless on, right, don't even have a meal, like eat a snack, eat without bread. Okay, well. So he says, right, Bet Yosef, he compares this, he likens this to the mitzvah of Havdalah. So meanwhile, just like with Havdalah, you're not allowed to eat until you do Havdalah, right, after Shabbat. So the same thing also here with this. But the Rambam doesn't seem to hold this way, right? So the Rambam holds, right, that Birkat HaMazon doesn't require a cup at all. So it seems to be the reason is because we learned the Mishnah, Perek Arei Psachim, it's Perek Kuf Yud Zayin, Mazgu lo kos shlishi, so they mixed for him, right, a third cup, mivarech alav birkat mezono. So he blesses, right, birkat hamazon. Ve'aminan ala b'gemara. So we said we got to in the Gemara. Amar leRavina leRava shmamina birkat hamazon teuna kos. So the rabbis learn from there that birkat hamazon does require a cup. Amar le'arba kaseh takinu rabbanan. So he answers them, no, the rabbis only made 4 cups, right? We're talking about Passover, right? Derech cherut, for freedom. היינו בעיקר כל אחד ואחד נעביד במצווה. בפרש הר"ן, ודאי מפשיטה לן, the mitzvah מן המובחר שתהיה הכוס. So he says, yeah, okay, we hold that, the best way to do is on the cup, right? ברכת המזון. שהרי נאמרו כמה מעלות טובות בכוס של ברכה. Because many, positive things were said about this, that it brings blessing, right? אלא מדתלן, but since we learned the Mishnah, ואפילו מן תמכוי בא אל המפשט למחזין עליה, שמחזין עליה כדרך שמחזין על המצוות. So, right, but then he says that even when you're taking food from charity, right, you should be very, very mindful of this and use a cup of wine as well. תקע שק הדעתם, תקוס שלישי משום ברכת המזון, תלכוד הוא, תעתה בדרכינן דעיקר תקנתם משום תחירות. אלא כיוון דאית עבדינן במצוות ברכת הברכה, וכיוון שהביא זה הריף והלכותיו, נראה שהוא פוסק לברכת המזון אין טעון הכוס, right? So he says over here that from this context over here of the Talmud, it seems like the Rif also doesn't require, a cup of wine for Birkat HaMazon. So we see, right, that there's a machloket here in the Rishonim, right? The Rif and the Rambam say it doesn't really require, it's not a requirement at all. Right? According to this, that which we said, the person who comes into his house on Motzi Shabbat, right? So you see from there that Birkat HaMazon doesn't require a cup. That's only for the best way to do the mitzvah. That's what it says also there. So says the Rashba, right, in this perek, the Birkat HaMazon ena teuna kos. So he also says, like the Rambam, right, that it does not require a cup. V'shechem dat arif, and the Rif also says like that. Katav dehu braita shenichnas leveto motzi Shabbat. So he says, what about that braita, which seems to say you do require a cup? The mashma mina the Birkat HaMazon teuna kos lo kamelam kivate. So the Rashba says we don't paskin like the braita. Right, that's why so therefore right? It doesn't require a cup. Oh, there you go, right? So you have, many rabbis here on this side, you have many rabbis on the other side. כתוב בקבל מימון, says in this Haggadah Maimon says, שדת רי ורבנו אלחנן, these rabbis, the בזימון מהתאונה כוס, right? When you do zimun, it does require a cup, אבל בספר המצוות, פסק כרבנו המחבר. But in ספר המצוות, he passes like right, the mechaber, the author, right? Which means the Rambam. So you see, right, we have a big machloket here regarding this. וכתב הקולבו, but the Kolbo says, right, Sheesh Mishomer, there is one that says the Birkat Hamazon Teuna Kos. The Birkat Hamazon does require a cup, Afilu leachid, even for an individual. So it's therefore when two people are eating together, right, each one has to take his cup, Birkat Hamazon. I can't see another. Midrash Rut Menelam, right? It says there's a Midrash, right, which is the Zohar, right? Chadash, the new Zohar, right? There is a part of the Zohar which is called the new Zohar. So Katuv Birkat Hamazon b'shlosha, right? As I told you, right over there it says three people. Tzarich kos shelo b'shlosha en tzarich kos. But if you don't have three people, you don't need it, right? I remember, right? Okay, good. Baruch Hashem, my memory hasn't failed me. So therefore, right, that's what it is, According to the Zohar, you only need it when you have three people. So he says, I saw some people who are there are stringent about this, even when there's not three, like those poskim who are machmir about this. Even for individual, it requires a cup. So they do, right, do a cup of wine for Birkat Hamazon. That to be stringent about this with this midrash. מניחים אותו על השולחן, so they put on the table, וגם תופסים אותו בידיים. So they don't hold it with their hand, right? So in other words, because this midrash says that if it's less than three, you don't need it, so therefore they don't hold it in their hand, Okay, so what midrash is that? That's a Zohar. Okay, okay, good. So yeah, let's move along. So it says over here, ואם אין היין מצוי באותו מקום, יכול לברך על השחר. So he says, as we said, right, if there's no wine in that place, they can use also, right, beer, right, and other types of beverages. B'shar mashkim and other things, right? All kinds of liquor and stuff. Perek Arab Psachim, right? It says over there in Arab Psachim, Kuf Zayin Amud Aleph, Hadetan Rabbanan En Mekadeshin Ela. That which we said, right, that we don't need to do kiddush with wine, Ela Yain, En Mevarachin Ela Ala Yain. Also, right, because Hamazon is only with wine. Katav Rosh has a Rosh regarding that. Mihu Aichat Dehava Chamar Medina. But the Rosh says, right, if it's like a widespread drink, in that place where you live, people, it's like, it's a widespread drink. So in other words, everybody likes that drink, in that country, right? Everybody drinks it. Like here in America, beer is very widespread. It's a big thing, America, beer. So, so we do bless on that, right? Same thing with the whiskey, right? All that stuff. It's very, very widespread, this stuff. So, כמו שנתברר לעיל, saying about, ונראה שדווקא על שחר וכיוצא בו ממרחים ברכת המזון. So he says, we only do right on ברכת המזון on the alcoholic beverages. במקום שאין יין, but that's only if there's no wine, right? מצוי. But if there's wine, אבל אם המים כלל, על המים כלל וכלל לא. But he says, when it comes to water, things like this, right? We cannot make, that's not called, right, a beverage, like, whatever, לא, וכן נראה מדברי הקולבו. This is says on the call. So that's what it says also on the kolbo. So we see from here, right, that when it comes to these mitzvot, kiddush and havdalah and birkat hamazon, we really need to have alcoholic beverage, right? But just like water-based beverages, like Coca-Cola, soda, right, stuff like that, right? Things which are water-based, they're water basically. They're just like water with some kind of a taste there. So those we cannot use for these things, it has to be something alcoholic. That's the whole thing. Okay, great. So that's the way my rabbi, Marav Shalom, Robadia, he paskins that you cannot use non-alcoholic beverages for these mitzvot, for kiddush, let's say, right? You cannot use coffee and tea, right, or milk, or orange juice, things like this. You cannot use those things. Okay, great. So we're done with this Bit Yosef. So this one was Aleph and Bet. So we're going to do Shulchan Aruch Aleph and Bet. Okay, so I got to bring up the Shulchan Aruch Kuf Pei Bet. Let's see what I can get. Okay, so it says over here like this, right? Shulchan Aruch. Yesh sheomrim shebirkat hamazon teunat kos afilu biyachid, right? As we said, there's different opinions, right? The first opinion is that birkat hamazon requires a cup of wine even for an individual. But tzarich lachazor elab, and you have to like look for it, go after it. Right? Velo yochal im en lo kos levarech alav. So he said, if he doesn't have a cup, right, you shouldn't even eat at all that meal. If he's right, if he's thinking that he's going to have it later on, whatever, right? He's hoping to have it. Even if you like, skip one meal, that's very stringent, that opinion. Well, if he's there, right? So according to this, he says that if two are eating together, so each one would have to have his own cup for birkat hamazon. Also, the other opinion, right, which is that it only requires a cup for three people, right? That was the Zohar, right, as we said, and also other poskim as well. We saw that they say it's only with three. Right, and some say it doesn't require at all, right? Even with three people. So what's halacha over here, right? According to the system that we devised. So right here we have basically yesh, 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 three times yesh. So which one do we go like, guys?
The last one.
Last one. Oh, okay. We have right, somebody who's experienced with this. Okay, right. So the last one, right? When we have always yes, 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 we go like the last yes. This is the rule, right? So therefore, the halacha really is, we don't require, but it's a mitzvah, if you can do it, God bless you, right? It's a good idea, to do it because it brings blessing, especially when you have three people, right? Then, according to the Zohar, you should do it, So, why not? Give it a try. But if you can't, right, whatever, it's okay, right, not the end of the world. You didn't transgress anything over here. Okay, very good. So, right, says the Rama over here. Mikol makom mitzvah min hamuvchar levarech, right? That's exactly what I just told you, right? Says the Rama, but is the best mitzvah is to bless, right? As we said, right? So, if you can do it, if you can hack it, give it a try. It'll bring blessing to your home. Okay, that's the Aleph, right? Let's go to Bet. So it says over here, Kos Birkat Hamazon eno ela al shel yain. So he says, right, that the Birkat Hamazon can only be done with a cup of wine, right? Not other drinks. Velo shar mashkin. Afilu kava seudat alon. Even if he made his meal on that, right? In other words, the whole meal he drank that stuff. Right? It doesn't really matter. It's still not really worthy of Birkat Hamazon. Only wine is. The im en yain matsui beoto makom. So it says if there's no wine in that place, right? The shechar or shar mashkin havut chama medina. But other types of alcoholic drinks, are considered to be like widespread drinks in that country, right? Like, America is a beer country. Come on, let's face it, right? So, beer is a big thing here in America. So, for sure, right, you can use beer if there's no wine, you know? Or, as we said, right, whiskey, stuff like that. Americans love that stuff. It sells like crazy, right? So, those things are considered to be, right, the drinks of the country, the alcoholic beverages of the country. Same thing with vodka, right? All that stuff, pretty much, right? All the stuff. Okay, so that's the story there. So if you don't have the wine, you can use that. Mevarchin alein chutz min hamayim, right? But as we said, right, one thing you can't use is water, right? So whatever is a water-based drink, you can't use that stuff, right? That's not serious. Right. So what are we talking about? Water-based, right? All those things, soda, right? Soda pop, right? Your soft drinks, all kinds of soft drinks, they're all water basically. They're just flavored water. So, same thing goes with coffee and tea, right? It's water, right? So that's not going to work out. Okay. So, same thing goes for Kiddush, by the way. Same rule. Also, Havdalah, same thing, right? So it says Ramah here, ומה שנוהגים במדינות אלו לברך על השחר. So right now I told you guys, right? The Ashkenazim like to use schnapps, right? The beer, right? Alcoholic beverages, whiskey, all that stuff, right? They like that stuff. Go to their, shul in the morning. That's where they make kiddush on, right? Many of them. I'm talking about especially the Hasidim, they're really into that stuff, right? So it says Ramah, לברך על השחר, אין למחות דעה, יש אומרים דענו טעון כוס כלל. So he says, don't object with them, if they do that. Because after all, right, as we said, some say you don't even need a real cup for Birkat Hamazon anyway. Right? So he's not really talking about Kiddush over here. He's talking about Birkat Hamazon, right? Ve'od deha ikar chamar. So he says also another thing is that, the alcoholic beverage of the country, medina hu shechar. So he says that's really the main drink, in these countries. You know what I mean? As we said, right? Beer is the thing, in the Western countries, right? They love beer. Right? The kovin soda love. And that's what they do meals on, especially in the old days, right? If you went to in the old days in Europe, right, from the good old times, right? What were they drinking? They were drinking wine, right? Not Coca-Cola. Nobody was drinking. They didn't have Coca-Cola those days, right? They were drinking beer. I'm sorry, not wine, right? They were drinking beer. Everybody was drinking beer and ale, right? All that stuff, right? It's all beer, types of beer. So, okay, great. So therefore, says the Ramah, right? There's room to be lenient with that. So he says in our countries we're lenient with that. The Ashkenazim, they're lenient. Okay, whatever, right? That's understood. Until this day, they're lenient with that. Right? So nothing much has changed. Good. So it's even though there is wine in the city, right? But nevertheless, with Ashkenazim, some of them are very lenient about that. בכל מקום, לא מקרה מצד מצוי לדבר הזה, שהוא ביוקר, ואי אפשר לקנות יין בכל מסעודה לברך עליו. But he says like this, something interesting, right? He says if the wine is like really expensive, then we don't really consider that to be like, available. It's not available. Too much money. Right? So therefore, we can go to the plan B, right? Beer and right alcohol, schnapps and all that stuff. Right? That's what he's saying. Especially in those days, by the way, in Europe, there was a lot of poverty there. So people didn't really have a lot of money. So that's why they drank that cheap stuff, right? The beer. Beer is very cheap stuff compared to wine, right? Okay. So then he moves on. The Ramah here says, but he says, "Omnam mitzvah b'ra b'char devar chalayan." But he says, nevertheless, but he agrees that the best way to do the mitzvah is on wine, right? So therefore, a person should try to use wine. Even if he's Ashkenazi, that's a preferred method, obviously. Those guys who like their schnapps, okay, we'll let them slide. But come on, go to the liquor store and buy some wine for God's sakes. You want to do the mitzvah the proper way. יש מדקדקים כשמברכים ביחיד על היין שלא לאחוז הכוס בידם. So he brings this right custom that we saw in the Bet Yosef, which is what? That the people who were doing, right, on a cup of wine, Birkat Hamazon, even though they're individual, so he says, as we said, right, they wouldn't hold it in their hand, even though you're supposed to hold it in your hand. According to the proper way to do the mitzvah is to hold it in your hand when you're doing Birkat Hamazon, but nevertheless, they wouldn't hold it in their hand. So as we said, right, what was the reason why they did that? Because according to the Zohar, you're not supposed to do it until you have three people. So therefore, in order to be, right, to balance out, the opinion of the Zohar, they went like, somewhere in the middle, made a compromise there. We'll use it, but we won't hold it. You get my point? Right, so they made a compromise there. Middle of the road. Okay. So So what would they do? They would just place it on the table. That was enough for them. So he said, according to Kabbalah, this is the proper way to do it. That's what he says, right? As we said, because according to the Zohar, you're not supposed to really do it until you have three people. Okay, very good. I guess you guys got the idea. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, we'll move on. We got some time left. We're not that far into it yet. Let's go to Gimel. So it says over here in Gimel, the tour, he brings the tour, but pagum, right? So this is somebody asked me in the shul today this question when I was praying there, right? His question was, are you can you use a cup, right, which is lacking wine, or does it have to be full? A full cup, right? So here it says, right, that it should be full. Like it says in Arbe Psachim, Shmamina Tamo Pegamo, Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi Kafid Akasad Pegima, more Barava Sher Kafid Afilu Achavita Pegima. So Rashbam explains that what does all this mean, this Gemara? Kafid Akasad Pegima, the Kiddush V'Avdalah, that means that when you're there doing Kiddush and Havdalah, Birkat Hamazon, and Ulachol Brachot, and they were doing Birkat Hamazon, all these blessings. Shetiknu is the sidran alayain that they made them on wine. The rabbis, decreed to do them on wine. Shelo yivarech ala kos pagum, right? They shouldn't bless on a pagum, right? Pagum means like it's somebody drank from it. It's lacking water, lacking drink there, right? Aval im rotze lishtot yain tzarich livarech borei pri gefen. But if he wants to drink wine, he does have to bless Bari Given. Why? Because you're not allowed to benefit from this world, right? Enjoy this world without a blessing. That's what it says in the Zohar, by the way, that's why, when we get married, right? At the chuppah, we make a blessing, Birkat Erusin, right? Why is that? Because you're not allowed to enjoy this world without a blessing. So we bless on the fact that you're going to enjoy being married, with your wife, whatever, right? You bless on that. Okay, so that's the idea. Okay, so even that you shouldn't enjoy without blessing. So afilu chavita chaviot klenot aval, right? So he says even if it's we're talking about a barrel of wine, right? Chavita these small barrels aval אם חבית של עץ גדולה, but if we're talking about a big, right, wooden barrel, אין להקפיד, so we're not particular about that. ונראה שמפני כך שינה רבנו הלשון, so that's because it seems like that's the reason why Rabbeinu, the Torah, changes language over here. כתב חצבה במקום חביתה. He didn't write the word חביתה, which means like a big barrel. Instead, he used the word חצבה, which means like a small barrel probably. אלא שמקום מקום, says nevertheless, הוא הבה לכתוב בפירוש דחבית גדולה, אין להקפיד. But he should have said anyway, right, says explicitly, that when it comes to a big barrel, we're not really particular about that. אבל רבנו ירוחם, but it says רבנו ירוחם, כתב ויין פגום נקרא אפילו שתה מן החבית. But he says, right, that it's even, if you drink from the barrel, it's still called pagum. So what does that mean? That it's lacking, right? So that means, right, that we want to have like a full cup, not a cup that, somebody drank from for this mitzvah, Birkat Hamazon. That's the bottom line. Okay, so then he goes on, מה שכתב רבנו דווקא ששתה ממנו, אבל אם שפך לכלי אחר, לא חשי פגום. So that's interesting, right? It says the Torah, I've seen this before, by the way, this nuance over here, which is that what? When is it called lacking? If somebody drank from it, right? But if it got spilled out, somebody spilled it out, it's not called lacking. Only if somebody drank from it. That's when it's a problem. Where is this coming from? From the Gemara, right? In Nun Bet Amud Aleph. Parich v'amar more, but it says over there, it objects over there. But didn't this rabbi say, Tamo Pegamo, that if he tasted it, that's already lacking? Meshane de ta'im le bideh. So he said that, yeah, but he tasted it with his hand. In other words, he spilled it out into his hand. He didn't drink from it. So therefore, we see from there that it's only called lacking if somebody drank from it, like from the cup. ממש. But if he spills it into his hand, or לתוך הכלי, or he spills it into another vessel, and he drinks it, that's not called really lacking anymore. But so he said the language, that's the way it implies. That if we said over there, right, that if he tasted it, that's when it's called lacking. But mamash mashma. So when it says right teima, in other words, that's really, what does that mean? You like taste it with your mouth, you drank with your mouth. It's not called about. It's not referring to spilling it out into the hand or kli or to a vessel. But the Rashba kataba the time lebide ve'im tamar im ken mai tamayu de betilel yesh tamar de kivan de bekos echad evio או השקיל מידד נחשוב אותו פגום. כמו שמברך על שיעורי הכסוד, וכן כתב רבד, ואי נמי יש לומר דמלוא בעינן. Right, so according to Rashba, I think the language of the Rashba here implies that even if, he spilled it out, it's still called lacking. So he seems to argue with what we said before, right? In the name of these other poskim that we brought here. So here also we have a machloket regarding this. Interesting. Okay, so we'll see in the Shulchan Aruch what's the halacha, right? I think we don't paskin like the Rashba here. We paskin that only if he drank from it, it's a problem. But we'll see. Right? We'll find out sooner or later. Sooner is better, right? Sooner is better. Okay, so let's go now. So it says over here in the Shulchan Aruch, right? As we said, right? That the cup that you're using for Birkat Hamazon, it shouldn't be pagum, right? Which means it's lacking, it's not full, right? Sheim shatam mimeno. So what does that mean? If he drank from it, pigamo, he made it like lacking, pigamo. It's like blemished, whatever, right? Whatever you want to call it. Fault, it's like, faulty, whatever, right? So defective. But it says if he spilled it into, right, his hand or a vessel, we don't care about that, right? So you see, we didn't go like the Rashba here. He was like a minority opinion over there, a single opinion, So we didn't go like him. Even if he drank it from like a small barrel, some kind of a little right vessel there, right? Yeah, there's a name for that in English. I forgot. Little barrel. There's a name for that. Whatever it's called. Anyway, right? So if he even that, right, it's still called pagum, right? If somebody drank from there. אבל אם שתה מחבית של עץ גדולה, but if he went, right, with a big barrel, like those big oak barrels, that they have, right? We're not talking about that, right? That's not called lacking. Even somebody drank from there. And we're not particular about that. יש מי שאומר שאפילו מים פגומים. So there is one that says, right, that even water, which is lacking, פסולים במזוג מכוס ישן ברכה. You shouldn't, right, use that to, right, to dilute the cup of wine. Wow, that's already, right. I don't think we paskin like this, but interesting that he brings this opinion here. We didn't even see it in the Bet Yosef. Okay, maybe it's in the tour. We gotta look over there. Interesting, very interesting. Let's take a look in the tour. The tour says some interesting things over here. So let's read this. Um, So I'll read the whole thing, right? So it says like this: Uperish Rashbam. It says the Rashbam. He says, "Dafka lechatchila." That's only lechatchila. We require a full cup, kafid, right? Lechatchila kafid. But misha en lo ela kos pagum. But if he only has a lacking cup, right? Somebody drank from it. Yachol kadesh alav. He can still do kiddush on that. But Rabbeinu Yoel katab. But this rabbi says, "Tafilu b'diavad she'eno acher." Even b'diavad, if he doesn't have anything else, in the barech alav. We shouldn't bless on that. Ve'aram Rotenberg, like this rabbi, Hayan noheg lebarech alav b'shat adchak. He would only do it like in a time of pressing need. There was nothing else, right? Ve'katab od she'im echaziro miyain. So he says furthermore, right, that if he shall kos pagum letocha kankan she'en lachush klal lebarech ala yain shebekankan. So as if you pour it back into the barrel, you can bless on it there, and we're not concerned about that. Mishum the kama batil, because it gets nullified. Vesh noagim leosif al kos pagum meat yain. So he says some also, what they do is if the wine is lacking, somebody drank from it, what they do is they add some wine to it, to fill it up. Right? The bekach yesh Yerushalmi. That's what it says in Yerushalmi. Vesh omim afilu al yedei mayim, right? Mitaken. Some say you can also fix it up with water, right? Add some water to it and fill it up like that. We do that, by the way, sometimes, in order to fill it up. When there's no choice, we put some extra water in there. That's fine. So now he brings another opinion, right? The tour in the end. He says some people, what they do is instead of adding wine or water, what they do is they add like breadcrumbs to it to make it higher. That's interesting. So he says, right, that ואומרים שתתקן עם חזקה, it says you can fix it like that, some say, right? מנהג של שותים, so it says, this is the minhag, it says, this custom is idiotic, custom of idiots, he says, right? ואין לא סומך על ולא ראה, it says, there's nothing to rely on there. Okay, well, it's good to know that, right, the idiots do that, right? They fill it up with breadcrumbs. Okay, so that's the end of the tour, the whole chapter there, right? So we'll go
What
to,
about placing a marble or something inside there?
yeah, that's pretty much the same thing,
Because
right?
there could
That's pretty idiotic, right? Okay, so you get the point, right? Okay, so okay, so let's go to Bet Yosef. Back to Bet Yosef, and we'll see what he says about all this. Yeah, so we did the Bet Yosef, so we're gonna go to Shulchan Aruch, right, and see what we got. So yeah, so yeah, we already read the Shulchan Aruch, so we're pretty much done with that one. So basically, right? What do we come up, with from this? What's our conclusion, right? So when you do Birkat Hamazon, right, with wine, make sure you fill up the cup, right? Right, and don't use something that somebody drank from, right? That's not proper. And as we said, right, if you add some more to it, that's fine. You can do that. That's good. Do a refill, right? Americans like refills. Okay, so there you go, right? So I guess we can go to Dalit. Maybe we can try a little bit more. Let's see. Let's see if we can try another one. Why not? We got all the time in the world, right, guys? Okay, so
Yes.
okay. All right. So let's see what we can do. Yeah, so it says over here, right, in Dalit, כתוב באוהל מועד, right? It says in this book, אוהל מועד, right? היו כוסות שלפני המסובין פגומין. So he says like this, right? Let's say, right, there was like a group of people eating together, right? And the cups of the other people, right? The people who are dining there, right, they were lacking, so it says, so since they're not feeling to bless on, right, those cups, because they're lacking, somebody drank from it. So it says, therefore, what you do is, fill it up from the other cup, the main cup, right, of blessing. וכן דת התוספות, that's what Tosfot says also. והרעה, also the רעה, אומר שלא הצליחו כוס שאינו פגום, אלא לברך. But the Ra says differently, right? He says they only required that the cup shouldn't be lacking, right, for the one who's blessing the Birkat Hamazon, not for the other people, right? So the other people, we don't really care about them so much. That's what he's saying, right? Okay, that's the end of this Bet Yosef. So let's see Shulchan Aruch, and I guess we'll stop there. Let's see Shulchan Aruch. Daled. So it says here, right? So he says if as we said, right, the other people, their cups were lacking. So we have to add from the other cup, the full cup, right, to them, to fill them up. So now I'm going to ask you guys a question, right? Trick question. Here it comes. I love these trick questions, right? We just said, right, that if the other cups are lacking, so we should fill up from the main cup, right? But then it's going to be the main cup is going to be lacking. So what does that help you? That's my question. That's my trick question for the night, guys. No, any answers on that?
We're thinking.
Okay. So, right, if you remember what I told you before, you'll have the answer. So the answer is like this, right? That we already said, right? It's only called
you can
lacking.
add grape juice or orange juice or one of those.
You can add grape juice for sure. Grape juice is wine. That's fine. But orange juice is not going to do it, right? Okay, well, it's also going to taste terrible like that. You don't want to mix orange juice with wine. Not a good idea.
It will taste terrible. It's a sangria. It's a sangria at that point.
Yeah, better to add some water, than to add orange juice. But anyway, right? So the answer was like this, right? We already said before, it's not called lacking until you drank from it, right? But here, if you just spill it out, it's not called lacking, That's the answer, right? So therefore, it's okay, Uh, that's how we can get away with this, this kind of scenario here. But then he brings the other opinion. Some say you don't have to do that, right? Why? Because the other people don't have to have the full cup, only the one who's blessing. Okay, whatever. So the truth is, nowadays, by the way, we all bless Birkat Hamazon, it's not only one person who does it for everybody, right? Like the old days, right? And one person would do for everybody. By the way, why don't we do that today? One person blesses for everybody. Anybody know what the answer is to that question? That's extra credit question.
That would be the elder, the owner of the house, or your teacher, somebody
Yeah.
higher than you.
Today, everybody blesses for themselves.
Because we know how to read and we know how to read the blessings.
Yeah, so okay. Yeah, you're right, it's true. But in the old days, one person would do it for everybody, even if they knew how to read. Sometimes, sometimes. By the way, some people don't know how to read today, whatever. Come to my neighborhood, you'll find some people like that. Okay, whatever. But anyway, like, you know what the answer is, guys? That there is it's brought down in the Rosh, if I remember correctly, in the Rosh. He brings down something interesting, in the laws of prayers. He says there, that when it comes to a long blessing, right? Technically speaking, yes, somebody else can do it for you. You just listen, right, and say amen, and you're going to be, fulfill your obligation like that. But the Rosh says, there's a problem with these long blessings. You know what it is? You guys are already catching my drift? What the problem is?
That we lose focus.
Exactly. You lose focus. Right. So that's the reason why we don't do it, because, Birkat Hamazon is a long blessing, So nobody can really focus enough, to listen to you all the way. He's going to start daydreaming, right? Thinking about, whatever, some other things, right? So because of that, it's not really a good way to do it like that.
Intention, the kavanah, right?
I'm sorry?
You have to have intention.
Yeah, intention is a good thing, I mean, the truth is he does have intention, but the problem is he loses focus in the middle, he drifts off somewhere, Like my rabbi used to say, I had an old rabbi used to tell me, not that rabbi, a different rabbi. He used to tell me, he says, today when we pray Amidah, we start off in New York and we finish in Tel Aviv. You know what I mean? Like, we're flying around, all over the place. We can't concentrate so good. You know what I mean? So, welcome to Tel Aviv, right? Michael, welcome to Tel Aviv, Michael.
For sure.
Yeah, where are you now, Michael?
You hear the planes?
Where are you now, Michael? Which part of the world are you in?
I'm at the airport in Dubai.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh Lord. Okay, well,
I was in there listening. I was in there listening to the class, and this is a highly Muslim area, and
yes. Hashem should guard you. Hashem should guard you over there.
I don't know. They pushed me out the door because I was listening to you in there, and
I see.
someone must have understood it.
Okay, I got you. I guess they don't like us too much there. But anyway, right? Anyway, the point is, right, as we said, guys. So therefore, right, you can do that, but the other opinion says you don't need it. But it seems like you're passing like the first opinion that you should do that. As we said today, we all do Birkat Hamazon by ourselves anyway, So whatever, it's a little bit different. Okay, so thanks for coming tonight. Be blessed with wealth and health and happiness. We'll see you tomorrow. Laila Tov, Chazak Baruch. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you. Michael, be careful over there, Michael.
Yeah, be
careful. May the Lord guard you over there.
Yes. Well, my SIM card doesn't. My phone won't accept a foreign SIM card, so I have to be on Wi-Fi, and I can't leave like the close proximity to the building and all that.
All right, that's good.